I guess the whole thing is a kind of bigger project. A year and a half or so ago, that I started thinking about the idea of how to. I don't know. I had certain dissatisfactions with the way art things work in general, and so the idea was, how do I kind of recede into the background and create something that can be a kind of vehicle for collaboration with other people, and a way to kind of continue doing my work, but without the necessity of applying for things and traveling a lot and taking time off to go and do shows and what have you. So the idea kind of arose that I was jokingly saying that I should just have a museum in my house. And then I realized like how horribly controlling I am to begin with, and then how much my girlfriend would kill me if I had the museum in my house, because I would have to, like, everything would have to be in its place and all of this. So so the idea was really, well, maybe I should just start a museum. So I mean, the kind of ridiculous idea of this institute was born a little bit, and the idea was really to have a way to not only continue to do my work, but to have a place to store these installations, or to kind of create a permanent home for some of these things, because I felt like a lot of what I was doing with wall drawing and tape and things directly on the wall had run its course a bit, that I wanted to start investigating texture and lighting and some of the other kind of, I don't know, richness that you can get that only comes with time, and the kind of time spent on something that you can really just sit and kind of work a bit until things kind of come together the way you want them to. And all of the installation work previously had been things that happened. I mean, I had the most 2 weeks to do something. There could be, you know, small built components, but essentially everything had to kind of become what it was going to be in a short period of time. So, and then the other thing is I have a lot of friends who are artists, and I think that that's a conversation that's ongoing with everyone. Like, how do you, in a real way, really support each other? I mean, everybody goes out and sees what we do, but I mean, there's definitely certain people who get, you know, more opportunities, and how do you use those opportunities that a few people get to kind of create opportunities for everyone else around you, and to kind of really support the community as a whole. And the Institute was another thing. Like, here's a way that we could create this thing, that we could have a gift shop, or we can create little chapbook publications, or we can send letters to all of the museums in the country and just say, you know, here's some interesting thing that we think is interesting, and what do you think? And so it was really like, again, not only just a place for my work, but a place that I could kind of create a platform for the people that I found interesting. I mean, the whole idea of Apple Records, like the come to us with a good idea and we'll give you money and then we'll see what happens. There's something really, I don't know. I mean, I think that's how money should work. Like, the people who have a lot of money should give it to people who have interesting ideas, and maybe the world would end up a really interesting place. So, I guess that was really the idea, is like how to, even if I can give somebody $50 to write an essay, or to do a little publication and work with an artist to do illustrations, or do something back and forth, where I can start finding a way to really grow the community. So that was the overarching kind of idea of the thing. So this first piece was really modeled after like large scale, life size animal dioramas, like wildlife dioramas in the Field Museum, or the Museum of Natural History in New York. And I think there's just something kind of captivating about those. And I was building environments, and I don't know, I was building environments and I was doing these drawings, and they both kind of had something to do with fables and fairy tales, and they weren't necessarily like meeting in the middle, because the environments were always kind of devoid of characters, and the drawings were always kind of the characters, and they kind of went together, but there wasn't like a direct linkage. And so this was somehow a way to, I guess, push people 2 steps back from the environment and still kind of be able to create an environmental type of installation, but to be able to kind of use these characters. And so that's kind of how the taxidermy got involved. And the taxidermy too, I thought initially, I mean, I thought about, you know, doing things like using animal parts, or standing them up, or making them more fairy tale-like. And I guess that part of the really interesting thing to me was, I mean, they're really kind of fascinating to get up close to and look at. I mean, you don't get to get that close to an animal, and so it's kind of captivating to like stand. There's something really creepy, like maybe it's going to jump out at you or something. I mean, there's just something strange about it. But then it's also something very familiar. The idea was to create a world out of, kind of bizarre household materials and whatever, but to kind of create something that was bright and fantastic, and, flowers bloom year round, and, birds sing, and all of the kind of fairy tale, tropes that everyone thinks about. But then to kind of infuse it with something that's very familiar, to kind of draw us in as an audience, to kind of make us understand that this somehow relates back to the world we actually exist in. So I guess that's really this piece, was just to kind of create a little vignette of a story, to kind of present this little kind of chunk of another world that's kind of been dropped into our world, and to kind of let people puzzle out what exactly is in there, because everybody has different experiences or different stories they heard as a kid, and that's really, I guess, what I expect will come out of people as you look at this and you relate it to what you know. And so that was really the idea of this. And then on top of it, I guess there was another thing I guess I've been thinking about a little bit, about just like the idea of like the cinematic gaze, like that view that we're used to seeing things inside of a framework. And it's interesting, I guess. I somehow feel like people are almost more willing to participate if they're held back a little bit, because we're used to seeing things through a window. We look at TV, we look at movies, we look at photographs. I mean, everything is kind of inside of a box. And so this was also a way to kind of create a visual box around it, to kind of set it aside as a space for thought or contemplation in a way that something that you stand inside of doesn't necessarily do. And yet it was really, the idea was to build it in a way that when you got up close to it, it still felt like you were a part of it. So, and then again, I guess because this is part of this museum idea, so each thing is kind of separated into rooms. So that's kind of the first room. The next area is, I guess, a group of artifacts, in a way, that are based on Northwest Coast Native American artifacts and masks. And I grew up in the Northwest, and as a kid, had kind of second-string relatives that were Native American, so I spent some time around powwows and kind of gatherings, and going and seeing, people working on the reservation doing carving and things. And there was just something really fascinating about the kind of graphicness of the designs. And then again, too, that this was like art that didn't serve necessarily just an aesthetic purpose, but it was something that brought a community together, that it really was something that was valued by everyone in the group in a way that I feel like kind of fine arts in mainstream society kind of is relegated to a different function now, that somehow it becomes intellectual and that shuts certain people out, or it becomes popular and then that shuts other people out. And so just the fact that this was something that everyone felt like was an integral part of their life, and that they functioned with art and it was important to them, and it could work that way on a multitude of levels. So I think that's what drew me to that artwork, and just visually it's really captivating. So these are things that are recreated kind of from my memories of what those things look at. I mean, I have some references and things, but they're not necessarily copies. And then they're kind of torqued a little bit to reference some of the kind of animals and fable things that I'm doing with my work, which is kind of convenient because they tend to use a lot of animals. But and then when I started doing it, I started doing the masks on my own, and I started thinking about the idea of kind of a guild or a group of people that get together and work on things together, that maybe there's someone who has a kind of editorial vision, that they're the decorator or the designer, and Japanese woodcut. There's a lot of kind of artistic forms that work that way, where it's really a group of people that get together and work towards a single goal. And so I had 3 or 4 friends actually come, and rather than giving them any sort of instructions, we just looked at the drawings that I had made and then made things based on the drawings. So some of these forms are actually kind of collaborative things. So, and I tried to piece together people that I thought somehow were part of like my artistic family, like people that I had a lot in common with, that we had done projects together before, or had, some sort of connection. So it was really kind of like building a little family group that made these things. So there's a series of those. And then Kind of next to that will be like kind of a salon-style installation of photographs. And this was actually kind of a dilemma for me on whether or not to even work with this project, because it's something that was kind of something I'd been working with, I'd had for a long time, and I really thought there was some kind of value to it as a project, but I somehow, the idea of using found photographs and kind of recontextualizing them was something that is not normally kind of within my sphere of practice. So, but these are all photographs of, I guess somehow in my head they all fall under the category of folly. Like that seems to be like the right word, that they're really just evidence of failure. There's floods and earthquakes and, you know, fallen buildings and tornadoes, and it's not necessarily about destruction. There's not bodies in any of these things. It's really just about the kind of, number one, the kind of aesthetic beauty of these things, that these are really beautifully composed photographs of horrible events, but that like every time this happens, that someone was compelled to say that we should remember this for some reason, that there's this like an ingrained knowledge somehow that all of these failures that we witness, they're only there for a minute, and that somehow we have to put them down on paper to be able to remind us of them. And so I just think that they're really fascinating. And I think that like success and failure go hand in hand. The good and the bad, I mean, all of those kind of, you know, dialectical things, but that somehow the only way that we know that we've come a long way is to kind of look backwards and see all of the stuff that we've been through. And so I think there's something just really interesting about that, and interesting about the fact that even without having a reason why, I mean, I'm not sure anyone who took those pictures could really voice what it was they found important about it, other than the fact that it was, you know, something fell down and we took a picture, but that again, I mean, it seems to be a kind of innate compulsion to like document these things. And then I think there's a kind of element of loss in all of this work, where I think one of the things that I think about a lot is the fact that, like I said, I think that we are a little bit divorced from the kind of everyday context of art, or from the kind of meaningfulness that it could have in your life as just something to bring you joy or to cause you to think or whatever. That sometimes it, you know, it gets commodified or it gets intellectualized, and it just gets divorced from the kind of, I don't know, kind of visceral reaction that you have to things when you encounter them for the first time. And wonder, I mean, I guess that's somehow a word I haven't said it at all, but I mean, the whole idea of wonder and the kind of wonder cabinet and the just that idea that somehow like that feeling of wonder, of not knowing, that it inspires you to investigate, inspires you to kind of further your own knowledge, or kind of write something or create something for yourself. So so after the photographs, then the kind of last piece, really the last kind of piece that people will encounter is a kind of gypsy caravan, circus wagon. I mean, I guess before the museum idea, I somehow thought a traveling circus would be the way to go, another kind of democratic medium, like take this big thing on wheels and all these parts and muscle it together and throw this weird glowing thing together in a field and kind of have people come out. And so the wagon was really the start of that idea, but it's really kind of also the interior of it will be installed with all of these kind of objects I surround myself with, sketches and models and all of these things that, again, some of those are failures and some of them successes, but it's kind of like the seed of where all of these things come from. It's like the seed that gets planted that comes into something. And so the wagon is really kind of a workshop, kind of the little hovel that you go into and find something magical, I guess, somehow. So it's really just kind of a little space to peer into my brain a little bit and kind of see the things I surround myself with, and then to kind of see like where the projects come from or how they come together, some of the things that kind of support all of those other ideas. So the idea is to, I mean, I'm hoping we're going to have some little takeaway things and ideas to really provide people with a kind of experience that this really is an institution that just doesn't have a home yet, that this is something like the work is made, like it just needs a kind of room to go in, and that they'll have something that they kind of take away that's a record of that visit, and that if the place finds a home, then they can bring it back, and it's a kind of a log, I guess. It's like a visitor log that people can kind of chart their comments or their reactions to things, and hopefully as the institute grows, they can come back and kind of continue to do that. And the idea is really to kind of coax people into a sense that daydreaming and imagination and the kind of, I don't know, all of that stuff that gets kind of driven out of you in the transition to adulthood, that's something that's worthwhile, and to kind of get people re-engaged in those practices. I guess all of the materials are essentially stuff that is easy to come by. And I think part of that comes from looking at other things like Joseph Cornell or something, where all these are kind of, bodged together, kind of collected materials, things that come out of a little archive of stuff. I mean, I have kind of junk surrounding me everywhere. And I guess too, like just the fact that like these are objects at hand, or I don't know. I mean, it's really kind of a combination of things. I mean, I think there's something really magical about what someone like Tara Donovan does with cups or plates or whatever. And so I think there's something of that sleight of hand, like how do you transform something that's like a known quantity into something that's completely different? And so that's a lot of it. And then the other thing is I think of this all somehow as really, I mean, in my head, it somehow goes back to my childhood. And I it definitely like connects with that part of me that when I was a kid, if somebody gave me like tons of stuff and like really good material, really good tools and assistance, that I somehow like, I like to think of this as things that I would have built when I was younger, that it still connects with that like mentally somehow. And the tools of childhood are like cardboard boxes and staples and screws and whatever you can get at the hardware store. And so pretty much everything here you could get at, Home Depot or, the silk floral Michaels or something, or Hobby Lobby. I mean, so pretty much as everything is like accessible, common materials that we interact with all the time. And so the idea is really like how to transform those into something that you almost don't recognize them, but then once you do, like you think, oh, wait a second, like this is all stuff I could have done, I guess. I mean, I want there to be that element that this is, like that there's nothing special about it, that it's really just a bunch of junk that's put together in an interesting way. And so I guess that's a lot of it. And cardboard, like I said, I use a ton of cardboard and tape, and this is AstroTurf and spray foam and fake plants. I mean, it's really like the kind of stuff that, you find at estate sales and that your grandmother throws out, and garbage dumpsters are filled with all of this stuff. And I mean, so I think just the commonness of it, that it's all really just mundane stuff, and how do you turn that into something interesting?